media icons. So on Instagram, you like have your stories saved, those story icons that I did. They're just like little logos to put on those. And these were like Christmas stuff I did with Illustrator. Like this was wrapping paper I made and I got it printed as a repeating pattern on wrapping paper, which was fun. I've done like mailers straight with Illustrator. That's the back side of the mailer. Tag designs, also. So some more businessy, some more artsy stuff, but I've done a lot of just different projects with Illustrator. It's become my favorite Adobe software. Okay, so we're going to start with like setting up your documents in Illustrator. And for the most part, it's a lot like any other Adobe product. You can go in and decide like if you're going to be doing it for mobile devices, for the web, for print, and it easily gets you to the settings you need. So I usually, like if I was going to print something, I just go straight to print and see if it has the settings I need. They've got letter, legal, A4, tabloid. You can also customize it over here. So if I was just going to be printing on a regular sized 8.5 by 11, I'd go by letter. This is what it would be sized in points, but you can go through and change it to like what it would be in inches. So if I pick inches, it automatically switches it to 8.5 by 11. And then your orientation, and then artboards are really cool. In Illustrator, I usually make sure I have all my artboards set up when I'm setting up my projects. So like, if I move this out of the way, you can see I have multiple artboards. This one I have 4, but they're all different sizes. And I'll get into the resize artboards here in a second. But to start off, maybe I want like 3 artboards to start off with, because I'm going to have like 3 pages I'm designing, front, back, and the front of something else. So I'll do 3 pages. And you can choose your bleed if it's going to have a bleed. And then in advanced options, you can choose your color mode. So commercial printing, CMYK, web, RGB. You can pick your color mode. So your colors won't be off for what you're using it for. And then this is important for if you are bringing in, if you saw the business mailer for the school I made, there were some raster images in there, not just Illustrator vectors. And that's where I wanted to make sure, I was printing it, so I wanted it to be enough pixels per inch that it wasn't like blurry or pixelated when I printed it. So I made sure anything that's raster that I brought into my vector files was a good enough quality. So you can adjust that. If it's only going to be on a screen, you can keep all raster files at a 72 pixels per inch. So you can combine these vector files with raster, which is really nice. Okay, so then you hit create, and you're ready to go, and you have your 3 artboards right there. A little more with artboards, because you can get into doing a lot of stuff with like your document setup over here. But before you even get started, I always recommend making sure like your window and your workspace is exactly how you want it. And sometimes, like, I have students a lot of times, and they're like, my toolbar disappeared, this disappeared. This is just a cool trick to get everything back to where you were. You go to Window, Workspace, and right now I have it in a painting workspace, but I like to work in Essentials Classic. And so I just switch it to Essentials Classic, and it just resets everything the way I like it. So I have my toolbar right here. I can even like put it back on my screen right here. And then I have more of the menu properties kind of stuff up here. But I can also get to properties over here. So that's also another way to get to it. But this is also where you can adjust artboards. You can edit your artboards. So right up here, if I click edit artboards, this is where I can like move them around. So maybe I want all my artboards to be aligned like this so that I can make sure they're all, like if I'm lining things up along the top, I can make sure they're all the same distance without having to measure it. I can just look at it with the guideline. You can add new artboards here, so you just click new artboard. You can resize them here, so this is how I like get different, like if I need to get a different size. You can resize when you're in edit artboard and it'll just like tell you what size you're doing. So that's handy. Anything else about documents set up? That's all I like to go over. One of the biggest tools you'll work with a lot, especially in logo design, is your shape tool. So that's kind of the one I wanted to touch on. That's a good basic tool to learn how to use. So I usually click and hold and I decide what my main tool or shape I want to use. If I am coloring the background of my entire artboard here, I just click my rectangular tool usually and I just like click and drag, color it. The color I want. Right now it's white, and I'll go over color in a minute. But I'm just going to just pick a random color to use right now. So that's where I would do that. If I was doing a background and I didn't want to mess around with it, I wanted to leave it how it is, that shape. You can also do layers like Photoshop does in Illustrator. So if I was in my layers, which my layers window is missing, so I can go into window, layers and find it. It's also right here. So 2 little squares right here. And this is where I can add in the layers. So you can see right now I have just this layer with the red on it. I can add another layer and then whatever I'm working on top of that, I can lock this bottom layer and then this layer won't get messed up. I can't move it, I can't select it, it's just there. I don't have to like worry about it getting messed up. And then you can also hide it, just like in Photoshop, so it's very similar that way. What's different about layers is if I'm making, well, I'll get onto that. I'll move into that later. I want to stay on shapes. So I'm going to make some more shapes. I have, say I have a square, and then I want to make a square with like a half circle on top, so it kind of has a dome on top of it. If that's the kind of shape I want to make, I can combine 2 shapes together by using the shape builder. So I usually make my 2 shapes the way I want them. And shortcut, this is just a quick shortcut. If you're resizing something and you hold Shift and Alt on your keyboard, it will resize it and keep it centered. So it's staying centered. If I don't hold Alt, it keeps it resized on the side. So that's just like a quick shortcut to like keeping things resized where you want them to be. But yeah, so you can see I have like 2 different shapes right now, and they're not combined yet. So I usually, there's 2 ways to combine shapes. There's lots of different tools you can use, but one that's quickest and easiest is when I select the 2 shapes I want to combine, or the 3 or 4 shapes, and then I go into my shape builder tool, which looks like this. It's 2 circles with a little mouse over it. Click on that. Then I have like this plus sign when I go over and I hover and it highlights it. I can select all the shapes that I want to combine. So right now it looks like I have 3 different shapes. And if I click and drag over all of them, now it's become just one shape on its own. I didn't have to group anything, it's just already all one shape together. Alternatively, I'm going to do all this. Back in the shape tool, if I wanted to minus out a piece, so say I wanted this shape and this shape to be together, but I don't want this centerpiece. So like if I'm making a donut, I do a lot of, I work for a company doing data visualization, and they don't love pie charts, they like the donut charts. So I oftentimes use like Shape Builder to cut out the center of like a donut shape. And so I just hold Alt on the keyboard and it switches it to a minus. And you just click it and then it's now gone. So now I have that like inside shape that I wanted. Because these weren't like totally connected because they're like right along the edge here, they're now two separate shapes. Which, if that ever happens, something you can do to like group two shapes together because they're not overlapping is I click on both of them, hold it, or select them both, and I usually right click and do group. You can also do Command G to group as well, or Control if you're on a PC. But yeah, so now that I've grouped those, I select one piece, it's going to select both of them. So that's another way to combine two pieces together. If you don't want them to be like joined forever permanently, then if I change my mind, I can ungroup it. Now they're separate again. So grouping and ungrouping is another way to combine things together without like permanently combining them. Another tool for making shapes and different things. So let's go, I'm going to make a circle, and I'm going to make another circle. Okay, so I have two circles, and another way I can like cut out and find shapes or paths if they cross each other is using what's called a Pathfinder. And sometimes I have it saved over here, but it's not. So I go to Window, Pathfinder, and this also is a way to do shape mode. So you have all these options. You can minus what's in front, you can intersect them, you can exclude pieces, you can unite them and combine them. This is to divide them. So like if I wanted to get rid of that circle that's on top, I just click minus front and now it's that donut shape. And it combines those. So this is now, I don't have like a separate line here and this isn't a separate shape either. I don't have two different circles, it's all one donut shape together. So Pathfinder is also another way to combine shapes. Any questions on like Pathfinder or Shape Builder? Okay. So another way to do shapes. If you wanted to do a triangle, there's like no triangle here. There's just the Polygon Tool. And this one, if you just like come out and you click anywhere you want to put your shape, you can then pick the number of sides you want for the polygon. So if I wanted a 6-sided or I want to do a triangle, 3 sides, click, and then I can just make adjustments to it. I can make it as long as I need, as big as I need, and make adjustments after I've brought it in. So that's how we get our different polygons. So that's the basics of your shape tool. Just playing with it. I did put this on the notes, but this is also kind of an important thing. If you want to have rounded corners and rounded edges, you'll see where it's pointing here. There's going to be little circles at each point, and that's what if you click and drag on those, you can then round your edges. So if I were to have made a rectangle that had sharp corners and I wanted to bring in all the corners, I can do this. If I only want to do one at a time, I think it is direct selection. Yeah, so one at a time you have to switch selection tools. So I switch from my selection tool to my direct selection, and that's to select one at a time. So then I can bring in just like one corner and around that one corner. And then yeah, if I don't click and I just click and hold, If I don't click and let go and I just click and hold, I can do all of them at the same time. So I got all those edges. So that's basically all the basic stuff with shapes that you would want to get to know and get used to using. Arranging and aligning. Okay, when I am doing a project, I usually make, I don't have it on here, I'll make some sort of like color scheme. This one's in circles. A lot of times I'll just get a bunch of squares and make a color scheme that I can like refer back to often. So I'll bring in my squares. Holding shift usually is what you need to hold to constrain it so it stays in a perfect square. I get all these squares in here. I'm going to keep all these white. I'm going to go over how to do this stuff in just a second. But anyways, shapes, back to shapes. So I have a bunch of squares, and I'm just being really quick. And I want them to be all aligned and straight just because I have, whether it's in a project or just to have my color scheme up above my project. I usually get all my squares ready, and then I select all of them, and I do my alignment so that I can just have them all straight and organized, and they're all not so like crooked and up and down. And that way I don't have to go through and do it by hand or turn on my guidelines or anything. I just go to vertical align center, or I do vertical align bottom. So there's more than one way to align things, and you can just see what for you. This is lining up from the top, center. Obviously they're all going to be the same because they're all the same size squares. But then you can align them by spacing, which if I go to more, so more options right here, I can space them and distribute them evenly. So I want them distributed evenly horizontally across. So I just go like that, and it just spaces them all perfectly evenly across this way. So that's just a quick way without having to do any guidelines, any sort of, just does it for you right off. And then I'm ready to like, we'll do this in a minute, but I'll bring out my colors, what I want to use. Rulers and guidelines. So if you notice when it's open, when you originally open your document, a lot of times your rulers don't show up. You don't see your rulers. So if you want to make adjustments, look at your rulers, adjustments, add guidelines. I usually make sure I've just clicked on my artboard, just somewhere on my artboard with the selection tool, and then in my properties, everything will be up what I need to see. So rulers, you can turn on your rulers this way. And you can also show the grid, so you can see what where all placement is along the grid. You can turn on transparency, so if you were wanting to have a transparent background and what it would kind of look like that way, you can do that. So you can turn everything on and off, and then you can turn on guides. You can hide your guides, you can unlock guides, smart guides. When I add a guide, usually if I was like making a header for every page of this project and I wanted a guide to go all the way across so that all the pages have the header starting at the same spot, I'll decide where I want it to be on one page and come on the ruler, and I'll mark it on the ruler. So I double click on the ruler, and then that guideline pops up. So if you double click on the rulers, your guideline will pop up. And then because I have all my pages all lined up next to each other, I can see exactly where it needs to be on all 3 pages. And you can do that with the vertical too. So if I needed guideline this way, and you can move guidelines. Right now I can't move the guideline, so if you find like you're not able to move your guidelines around, you need to unlock your guidelines. So right here. They were locked, so now they're unlocked. Now I can move them around, place them where I need them to be, all that good stuff. And then you can go back, click back on my artboard, get back on here. I can lock them again once I'm done. I can hide them if I don't want to see them anymore. So it's just easy to just like go back and forth. And I like going from here. I like using it for my properties. You can always find all these tools in the drop downs. Like guides, so guides and guidelines and smart guides in your grid, they're all in view. So if for some reason your properties you can't find them, you can always find them with the drop down view. Any questions about guidelines before I move on? Okay. So those are just these. That's a great thing to do before you start working, is like setting up. When you set up, get your guidelines ready, all that stuff. I always make sure I do those things first. And alignment, stuff like that before I get started on a project. Okay. Adding raster images. So, who knows what's the difference between vector and raster? Do you want to tell us what it is?
Vector is actually line drawing. You have angles and curves, whereas raster is pixels.
Yeah, lots of dots of color. And then vector, yeah, it's math, basically. It's done by math. So you can scale it up as big as you want, and it's never going to get pixelated like a raster image, because raster is a bunch of little squares. And the less squares you have, the bigger you go, the more you'll see those squares as it gets pixelated. So if you're doing billboard size stuff, and you want a logo on this billboard, it's nice to save it as a vector file, because then you can blow it up as big as you need to. It's not going to get pixelated or anything. So, but you can still bring in raster files into Illustrator as you're working on a vector project. So if I was to be making a mailer, I have it all designed out, and then I need to bring in a photo. So usually when I do that, I just need to find a photo really quick. I forgot to get one ready. Photo ready, so I'm just going to take a screenshot and then mount it. Okay, so I'm bringing in, I just drag and drop when I bring stuff in. It's just the quickest, easiest way for me to bring a photo in. First things first, so you need to decide if you're going to embed your raster image or you're going to have a file saved separately with all of your pictures. So when I'm working on a big project and I don't want my file size to be huge, I usually make a file of assets. So if I have like a ton of photos in my Illustrator project, I'll make a separate folder and I'll save all those photos in there. And then whoever I'm sending the project to, I also have to remember to send them the folder with all the assets and all those images, or else when they open the Illustrator file, they're not going to see those pictures if they don't have a saved copy of all those. If you don't want to do that, you don't want to go roundabout way and give them another folder. You just want to give them the project in an Illustrator file, or you just want to save it that way. I always make sure to embed all my images. So you just go up here and you click embed. And once I do that, now it's like gone. If I were, now it's there. If I were to delete my original photo off my desktop and throw it in the trash, it wouldn't mess up my project. It wouldn't disappear. I have it saved forever in my actual file, so it doesn't. Yeah. So it doesn't matter if I save it separately or not. Okay, so I have my raster image file. In the beginning, I set it to be at 300 pixels per inch, so it's going to be pretty high quality. But if I'm printing it, it will be fine. You can make changes to your document after you set up. If you want to just double check things, I always go to File, Document Setup, and you can make changes and fix things later. That's another way to change artboards as well. You can edit your artboards this way. That's just like go back if you want to make changes after you've set up. Another thing I use often when I'm in Illustrator is the clipping mask. If I have like a picture like this, but I want it to be a circle shape, I usually use the clipping mask. That way it doesn't like delete my photo or anything, and I can make changes to it later, but it does let me turn it into a circle. So I will just get my shape builder tool out, or not shape builder, just shape tool, whatever size shape I want, circle, square, and I'll make my shape whatever I need it to be. And like where I'm going to place it. You can switch between your stroke and your fill over here. I'll go more into detail on that in a second. So I want my outline to be white, and I don't want to see, I want to be able to see what I have on the inside right now. So I can just kind of place it better. And then to make a clipping mask, I just select my background photo, and then I select the top shape that I'm wanting to use to cut out that size. And I select them both, and then I just right click, make clipping mask, and now I have just that image in that shape. You can do that with any shape you make. You can make your own shape, you can use any of the other shapes. Yeah, so again, I'll show you one more. I'll do a different shape. I'm going to do, this time I want it to be a star. Just place it exactly where I want it. Select them both. Right click, make clipping mask, and there we go. Yeah, I'll cut out in there. And then if I go in here and I like get into the group, I can actually make adjustments to it. So I can like move it where I wanted to, and then when I get out of this group layer and I go back to level 1, it's like moved it over. So I still have my entire image underneath there. It's kind of like just like framing it right now. And I can just move it around wherever I need it to go. So it's kind of like it automatically, when you clip something, it automatically makes those two things into a group. You can go in and edit that group if you double click. So that's the same like if you group multiple shapes together, double click them, you get into that group and you can work on that group together. Okay. Color. This, I've kind of already been like doing some of the color stuff. I made some shapes. When I'm doing color, like a color scheme, say I brought in an image that I wanted to use. Maybe this is like my color scheme I want to use. I want to use the browns, the oranges, the yellows, the grays, whatever colors I have in this picture, I want now to be my color scheme. You can click on a shape that you've made and then click I on the keyboard, which is also your eyedropper tool. Just looks like a little scientific eyedropper. And I go over and I mouse over to whatever color I'm wanting to select. So if I want it to be this orange color and select it, it then now becomes that color. So I can match the color to the one that I have in my photo. And then I just go through and I do that with like all my other colors. So if I wanted this yellow color right there, I'd probably have to zoom in a little bit. Yeah, so I'm getting all my colors I need just by using that eyedropper tool. And that's how you can match colors. If you were already working on a project and I made a shape and it it wasn't the color I wanted, I always just use the eyedropper and I just go to the right color that I need. Just switch colors that way. So it's really quick that way. You can also save colors in swatches or make like a new like color group, which is another way to like save your color scheme or whatever you're working on. I like to have it visually right there on my board, but some people like to save them in the folders here, and you just do new folder. I'll just call it color group 1, whatever it is, and then I can add. So the 3 I have here, sorry, I messed that up. That I have to select my colors that I want to be in my color group, then new color group, so then I call it fall. So then this color group is my fall color group. And that I can just save that color group forever. I can come back to it later if I need to. So that's just in your swatches, which is like these little squares up here. They're great to use. Another thing that's really cool with color. So sometimes I'll be like working on a design or something, but I'll want to see like what my other options might be, like color-wise. So I'll do like a whole project. Let's bring this up here. We'll do it with this one. We're going to go with this one. So these are like, I'm going to select part of this project I have. I have the darker blue, the light blue, the gray, the orange, the green, and those colors. And I want to kind of play around with what it might look like differently. There's a really cool little color wheel right here at the top on your menu bar. And this is how I go through and see what it would look like differently. So I can do things like randomly change the saturation and brightness. So it'll go through and it'll change how bright those colors are, which is kind of like just a fun way to play with it. You can also randomly change the color order. So I can be like, oh, maybe I want that color on. And I can just keep switching and swapping through and playing with color order. It gives me lots of different options. You can even like say, oh, I do like having the green become the orange and the orange become the green, but I don't like these ones. So you can just like play around with some of these. And then you can like turn off those arrows, and that means like it won't swap those colors. It will only play with swapping these 3 colors. So then when I swap, just those ones will change. So it's just like a fun way to like change, just find your other options. You can add in more colors. It goes way more. You can do way more stuff than I'm showing you, but you can play around with it because you can play with your hues, your saturations, all within here. So yeah, and then you just hit OK to save it, cancel if you don't want it. It goes back to normal. So that color wheel up here is just kind of a fun little tool that not many people know about. Also with color is gradient, and a lot of vector projects, people like to do gradients. So if you're interested in doing gradient stuff, I'd recommend just clicking on the shape that you want to add a gradient to, and then instead of, so we've got both, I guess I should go back and, if you're not familiar with like the adding color, you've got, over here you've got your fill color, and this is your stroke, so your outline around it. And if you have a red line, no fill or no stroke, this tool right here, when you click on it, it adds a gradient. So the middle one right here will add a gradient, and this one will make it a solid. So if I were to make it a gradient, just click right here. And right now it's doing my outline as a gradient. I don't want that. Just flip-flop that. And now my inside's a gradient. And And then I can go through and I can select which colors I want to be in my gradient. So these little boxes right here are where you select your color. So right now it's white and black, and I can just click on that little box right there, and I can pick my colors. So I don't have a lot of color options on here, save. So I could go through and save more colors. But maybe I just want to use this one. I want it to go to yellow. Oh, and it's still doing it on this. I'll have to switch my stroke. But anyways, so that's where I get my gradient right there. And then I can also make changes to my gradient. I can save different versions here. I can add it to swatches. If I've made a gradient, I can save it and add it to swatches and use it multiple times. And you can also switch it to like radial and linear. So instead of left to right or right to left. Yeah. You can also add more colors to the gradient slider by just hitting the plus. I gotta work on this guy. So if I wanted to add another color in here, I just click, and then I can add, we don't have that orangey color. Looks like I'm not working on this guy. I wasn't selected. So now I've got the three gradients, the three color gradient. So that's where you can play with gradients. There's a new gradient tool I haven't played with, but there's a tutorial on Illustrator, and it's like a way to gradient just like a section, like just have it radial out from like one area and just do a small little gradient right there. And it like just focuses on one area at a time. So that's kind of a cool extra color tool that's new to Illustrator. There's a lot of tutorials on just Adobe, which I highly recommend just checking those out when you feel like you want to learn something new or the new stuff for the new updates. Because like every new update, they add new things that you can do in Illustrator. Like you could spend forever learning all these new tools and different things.
Hey, Brooke.
Yeah.
Quick question on the gradient.
Yeah.
So I was just playing around with one of my files. I have some text, but it's not, it's text changed to line. So, but when I hit the gradient on it, it does the gradient on each separate letter.
And you want it
I
to
do the
be
gradient across the whole
thing.
Maybe you don't want to go into that right now, but I was just wondering.
There, yeah. So that would be more like if I was over here. I would almost do like clipping mats, where you make a gradient background.
Oh, okay. And then apply that to the
and then make
layer.
the shape outlines be a clipping mask
Okay.
over the top and cut out. Yeah. That's probably the way I would go about it. Because yeah, I see what you're saying. Each individual one was starting over.
Yeah.
The gradient. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, live paint bucket. So I have some like shapes I've made. I'll just look at these ones. So they're like all individual shapes that I have right here. But if I just want to quickly go through and paint the whole thing with not clicking on each one and filling each one separately, I can go to the paint bucket, which is K on the keyboard. I think it's connected to the shape builder one. So if you click and hold on shape builder, it's the live paint bucket. And so when you've made a selection of something, you hit K or go to the live paint bucket, and then you click on that shape. And now I can start coloring each section individually, and it will fill that color the way I want. So if I wanted this one to have red, and then I wanted this one to be a different color, I can just go in and switch my color. I wanted this one to be gold. Now I've colored both shapes just really quickly. So that live paint bucket tool is just a quick way to go through and add color to an image that's not all connected and they're all just different shapes. It'll just connect them all for you and make it easy to just drop the colors in. And yeah, I put that on typography. Okay, so if you have text and it is, this was one of the first big things I learned with Illustrator. I sent a file to get printed, like a big poster to get printed, and they printed it and it didn't have the font that I had designed it with. And I was like, what? I sent it to you, and then they're like, no, we don't have that font. And I was like, shoot. So I messed up because they didn't have the downloaded version of that font that I used. And what I should have done is turn my text into actual outlines, which that's what Eric kind of brought up. Taking each letter and making them their own shape instead of it. But that means you can't like edit it after and like retype. So to do that, if I wanted connection to be saved the way it is in vector form without being changed fonts later, I select it and I go to type and create outlines, but it's not letting me do that. I'll just click on it, object, type, create outlines, and now you can see they're all connected still in a group, but when I double click, they're now I can play with them individually. So like if I wanted to move each individual letter, I wanted to do some fun typography stuff, move them around. This is where you can even get fun. You can get your direct selection tool and you can even just adjust just a couple points. Say I wanted to like make my letter look a little different. So you can have some fun that way, and it gives you some freedom to like move individual letters around without having to do much work. So that creating outlines is super helpful. And now they're just their own shapes, basically is what they are. Typing like around circles, lines, things like that. A lot of times, even if you're making a logo and you want to add in, did that here? Yeah, like I wanted to add in the words down below and a curve for different spots. What you do for that? Oh, I gotta get out of my layer here. What you usually do for that is I'll like select a shape. And if you have a shape selected and then you go text tool, you can just actually type on path. And you just click on that, on whatever shape it is that you want to type on. So I could even type on any of these. If I clicked on this one, it's type on path, and I can start typing on that path. But then it also gets rid of the line. So you have to like make another copy of the line if you wanted to keep the line there. So that's a really quick way to just start typing in a curve that you need to make. But there's multiple ways to do it, because there's also in your type tool, you've got area type tool, or it will just type inside the shape that you've made. Type on path is just, you can get to that through the type tool. Vertical type tool, and there's the vertical area type tool. Yeah, so lots of options there with your text and when you're typing. Okay. And now I want to get into the pen tool, and the pen tool scares a lot of my students, at least. Because it's a lot of practice. It just takes practice and time. There's a pen tool in a lot of other programs like Photoshop and things, but in Illustrator, I'm gonna pull in projects. So if I were to be, if I had like some sort of sketch or drawing and I wanted to vectorize it, so I like did a little sketch on paper and I wanted to start vectorizing it with a certain way, I usually go to my pen tool, which is P on the keyboard, and I'll like, when I'm making my shape, so you can like click click, click, and you can just like make your shapes, right? And they all connect. And this would do straight lines. So I made my kind of more freehand hexagon. Yeah, that way. But the pen tool also can do curves. And so if I was trying to make this shape right here, and I wanted it to be, I didn't want it to be perfect, like the oval shape tool. I wanted it to look more, just kind of walking a little bit. Usually click, and then I click and drag until I get to about the shape I want. And then I go to the next spot. I can kind of click and drag until I get to the curve I want. So you're just clicking and holding. Clicking and holding and dragging and connecting. So you can see here, I don't have it all perfect. Like there's this spot. But what these are right here are your handles, and this is where you can make adjustments. So if I go onto the handle and I click Alt on my keyboard or Option, that's where I can adjust these handles after I've already drawn. I can minus out points. I can also make adjustments with the direct selection tool, and I kind of mentioned this when you're like, if you want to play with the font points. The direct selection tool will allow you to just click on a point. This also allows you to move the handles another way. So I can play with it, get really detailed. I can make sure it's like exactly how I want it by moving those handles with the direct selection tool. So now, that. Alt is if I'm only moving one handle at a time. Because if I didn't hold down Alt, usually, well, that's when you're in the pen tool. But this one's still going to do one at a time. So I guess you're fine. Yeah. So I'll just like play with these. There's my handle. Oh yeah, it's moving both of them. Yeah. So you do have to hold Alt to do one at a time. So if I just wanted to focus on this side, you have to do Alt. So on this one, you can drag it out to change the length of your curve. There's like, it's just a lot of practicing and playing with how to make the curves that you want to make. So I did, on the handout, I have in a file, it's called, so it's the http://, it's the bit.ly Adobe Crash Course. And I put in a pen tool practice worksheet. I'm just going to show you, like, this is actually how I learned really how to use the pen tool really well. And it was just practicing with this worksheet. So I'll show you that really quick and how to use that. It's just a Google file, and it's under Beginner Illustrator. And it's this pen tool practice one. And it goes through how to make each of these shapes. So how to make a perfect circle with the pen tool. And even though you can make a perfect circle other ways, it's just good to practice how to make it. And it goes through step by step what you need to do at each point, and how to move handles, and how to play with all the different points. So just a good like extra resource to practice, like how to make these curves and different shapes. Yeah, most of my projects I've used the pen tool for. If I didn't use the pen tool, I usually, what I did was I used my brush tool and I drew my shape that I wanted. And then I went in and let's get rid of the stroke. I made the shape that I wanted, and then I went in later with my direct selection tool and made adjustments to my shape. So then I came in and like changed my curve, I moved my point around. So sometimes I'll just use my brush tool if I'm trying to be really quick, and then I change where I want things to be after that. And I just kind of play around with it. So it's a lot of just like kind of playing around. But it usually gets you what you need as well. I'm going to show, there's a few things on the paper I didn't put onto the paper. I mean, a few things I didn't put on the paper that I wanted to show you that are really quick. Just little tricks. If you had something like this and you wanted it to be, without having to hand vectorize it with the pen tool, go through and make it that way, you can click on an image and you can go to image trace and it will vectorize it for you. So you can choose how you want it to image trace. If it's a photo with like lots of colors, maybe you want it to only be 3 colors vectorized. You can vectorize it very detailed, sketch art, high fidelity photo, different versions. So this is just black and white, so I can just do vectorize it as a black and white logo. Goes through the process. Now you can see it's vectorized. You can see all those details from my raster image are gone, and it's quickly made into a vector version. That's just like a really quick way to vectorize things. Because now I can scale it as big as I want, and it doesn't matter. But when you do that and it has a white background, you can go through and delete different parts of it. So it's like all grouped together. So the white background, all these black spots are all grouped together. So if I want to get in and work on individual parts, either you need to go to your direct selection and select different pieces of it. And then, before you can even select parts of it, after you've done the image trace, you need to hit expand. So you do image trace, then expand. When you click expand, now each part is its own shape. You can select just individual pieces. They're grouped together right now, so I have to like go into my group layers and like really get into each piece. So like this piece, I've selected, I like triple clicked it to like select just that one piece. Now I can play around with just this one piece. It's fun, but maybe I just want to get into the white, and I can delete the white. Now I just have the black. So they're just like, that's a quick tool that I use a lot when I'm like vectorizing something and I don't want to do it by hand. So just remember to do the expand, or else you won't be able to like make adjustments to it or get rid of the background or whatever it is you're doing with it. Yeah, so anything that's like connected is going to give you like one shape. So like this was all connected, so it's one shape. Out, and it stays, if I get out of the grouping, it's back to being grouped together like this. So you can kind of play with the layers. So that's kind of, I don't play with layers over here quite as much, because you can layer within a layer with the vectors, with grouping and all those things. So like this one is behind this one, and they're still on the same layer too, but they're still behind each other. So if for some reason you had some things on the same layer, you don't want to separate them out on different layers to rearrange them, you can rearrange them doing this. So you click on the one that you want to move, and I right click it, and I go to arrange, and then you can bring it to the front, you can send it to the back, and rearrange the layers in that way within the same layer. So if I want that to be the front, now it's on top of that. So that was rearranging those layers. So for the next class, I will be going over a lot more of what, like more detail of what you can do with Illustrator. Just like bigger projects that you're working on. This is basically just like your layout, laying, design, text, font, that kind of stuff. Yeah. What was that?
The glyphs.
The glyphs. So what did you recommend that?
So how do you bring it?
Oh, okay. So, oh yeah, that's a good question. So if I were to like do you download like the glyphs you want with a font? Yeah. So if I were to like, I put this resource, I'm glad you brought that up. I put a resource on here. It's creativemarket.com just because I love this resource. Because I get free ones every week. And it gives me like free fonts, free Photoshop brushes, Illustrator brushes. And it saves everything that I've like downloaded, either bought or got for free. A lot of vector stuff, like this Halloween vector collection. There's Christmas vectors. I get a lot of vector clip art stuff through here, so I don't have to like recreate my own stuff. I can use these designs for projects that I'm doing. But yeah, so if I were to have downloaded a font, so say it's like Pine Forest or whatever it is. I don't use a PC, but it's a similar way. You install your font. Once you've installed your fonts, so I do it usually, let's just go to this one. This is the swatches that go with this font. Once I open it, I just hit install font and bring it in. So these are all my like fonts that I've installed. So some of them have like glyphs and things. This one has like swashes and symbols, things like that. So I'm gonna use that one. So if I were to like type something out and I went to symbols, okay. So you're talking about like glyphs like these ones and the fonts. You can turn them into their own individual shape, same way you do with like outlining fonts. So I'll like select the one I want to use, or if I had only typed the one, select whatever I'm trying to turn into, and I just, same way I did with the fonts, and I go to create outlines. So type, create outlines. And then, so right now they're all grouped together, so if I click one, it selects them all. But if I double click one of them, I can move just that individual one, and now it's just like its own little shape, and I can use it for whatever I need. Make it bigger, just kind of play with it and manipulate it the way I need to. And then like, because this has multiple shapes within it, if I like triple click it, I can manipulate those pieces within that shape. So there's lots of ways to like manipulate what you're working on after you've created the outlines and turned it into a shape. Any other questions? Yeah.
With your grading, is there a way to create like a lighting source so when you're trying to make a grading come
From a certain
specific direction?
Yeah, that was that that new feature I was explaining.
Mhm.
Let me pull that up for you. So sometimes the tutorials will pop up like directly in here. But it's the freeform gradient, I think is what you want to do.
Okay.
And pick your light source, kind of like which direction you want it to come from. So there's a few tutorials like straight from Adobe. Obviously there's this one from this person. But yeah, I like to go into the tutorials straight from Adobe. They're usually pretty straight to the point. It used to be on their main page, then second tool. Should have gone through it. Illustrator. Oh, here it is. So it's on the Illustrator Adobe and it's freeform gradients. And this is where I would go to go through and get that information. So, because you can kind of see like they picked and chosen. I don't know. Would that help you with like doing it that way?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I think when I opened up Illustrator, it pulled that tutorial up right away. So you may be able to like go in straight through here. Yeah. It's not pulling it up, but I think you can go through and do those tutorials straight, hands-on, and it'll like walk you through it on Illustrator, which is really handy. Well, are there anything else for this class that you guys would like to know? I know that was a lot of information, especially if you're like a beginner, but my biggest advice is just playing around with it. A lot of you were like playing around while I was talking, that's great. Like just the more you do it, the more you're gonna learn. And learning all those little shortcuts, like Type Tools T, memorizing all those shortcuts will help speed up your design process as you're working on things. And then the next class, I'm going to go into like just more design ideas, how to like make logos and really get into like if you were to design something, a logo or a glyph or making your own fonts. There's a lot you can do with Illustrator. So that's what we'll